بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of you your fasts and your prayers and our gathering together to learn about His sacred law in these blessed days and moments. My name is Sohail Hanif. I'm the Chief Executive of National Zakat Foundation. I've been in this position for about 6 months. Prior to this, I was a lecturer and teacher and researcher in Islamic law. And I was researching and teaching at Cambridge Muslim College. For me, all of my life has been about studying the sacred law, and I've made this jump almost into this space of what you might consider to be charity work. And the reason why I made this jump is that I concluded after my years of study and teaching that the entirety of the sacred law is ultimately about showing us how to build institutions that strengthen our community. And I want to illustrate this through my discussion today about zakat. What I'd like to do today, and I'll do my best to speak not too much more than 35 minutes, I want to discuss what I call the why, the what, the how, and the where of zakat. In the why, I want to discover 3 points which will give us some sense about why there is a thing called zakat. 3 things I'd like us to be thinking about. When it comes to the what, I want to answer 5 questions which I believe gives us a main sense of what is this thing called zakat as an institution. Then I want to, in the how, cover 6 questions which will give us what I believe all we really need to know to calculate our zakat. And then finally, in the where, I want to just reflect on a few points about what we might call local needs and opportunities with our zakat work. And after that, I'll inshallah take any questions that people have. When it comes to the why of zakat, I want us to think about, like I said, 3 things. The first of them is just the word. The word zakat in Arabic means purification and it means growth. Why does it mean purification? It's because as time passes over our wealth, it no longer fully belongs to us. A part of it belongs to the poor. If we do not give it to them, then we are guilty of eating somebody else's money. So if you think of lying and cheating and stealing and usurping, that's what it's like to not pay zakat, because the money isn't yours, and that's why it's an impurification, or it's a pollution of, you could say, a financial corruption, if you like. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, Inna Allah tayyibun la yaqbalu illa tayyiba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pure and good. He only accepts what is pure and good. And so we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept us, and that's why we need to make sure that what we eat is really ours. And the purification of the wealth is to get the money out which isn't ours. And that's what maintains the blessings in our own wealth. Why does zakat mean growth? Because of the promise we find throughout the Quran and the Sunnah, that if we spend for the sake of Allah, then Allah is the one who receives it. And Allah is the one who gives back to us in unimaginable ways, in this life and in the next life. Or in the words of the Prophet ﷺ, مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. Money has never decreased when it was spent for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So point number 1 is that we need zakat for our sake. Before you think about people outside of us, we are the needy who need to pay zakat to ensure the protection of our own lives and wealth and blessings. Point number 2, what I want to stress, zakat as an institution was taught and revealed in Medina. So what was the Quran talking about charity in the whole Meccan period? What did the Quran have to say about this? The Quran had quite a lot to say about this. From the beginning of the Quranic, if you like, message and mission in Mecca, the Quran was clearly challenging its society in 2 very, very distinct ways. One was the challenge of Iman, that there is only one true God and you have to know and worship Him. That was its challenge to its society. It also had another challenge, and the other challenge you could call a social challenge. It said there's some people who are yatim, orphan, and some people are miskeen, impoverished, and some people are ibn sabil, refugees or aliens. And the Quran talks about them a lot in the Meccan revelations, that you have to be there for them. If you're not there for them, you're going to be in trouble. And in fact, you might also be in hell as well. really strong messaging about these undermined or downtrodden people in society. So for example, in Surah Al-Haqqa from the Meccan Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, about the people in hell, the really bad people. It says, خُذُوهُ فَغُلُّوهُ, take him and tie him. ثُمَّ الْجَحِيمَ صَلُّوهُ, and then in the hell roast him. ثُمَّ فِي سِلْسِلَةٍ ذَرْعُهَا سَبْعُونَ ذِرَاعًا فَاسْلُكُوهُ, and in this long chain tie him. Why? What was his crime? Just 2 crimes it says. إِنَّهُ كَانَ لَا يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ الْعَظِيمِ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. That's it. There's 2 reasons why he's being treated like an absolute criminal in hell. He didn't believe in God the Tremendous, and he didn't urge people to feed the hungry. That's it. And what's the consequence? فَلَيْسَ لَهُ الْيَوْمَ هَاهُنَا حَمِيمٌ. And he's got no friends anymore here with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you get the strength and the importance the message gave right at the beginning. This message is going to challenge a society that doesn't care for the downtrodden. So point number 2 is, care for those who are not represented. Care for those who have no carer in this society is of the most central meanings of what it means to be a Muslim from the beginning of Islam. So it's important to understand this. That's why before there was any zakat which came in Medina, still the Quran talked about the believers in Mecca, saying about them, الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. That to be a believer meant some of your wealth, you just put it aside for those in need, those who were asked and those who were not able to ask. So point number 2 is the centrality of care for the needy to what it means to be a Muslim. Point number 3 is now zakat as institution. When the Prophet ﷺ went to Medina, he laid the foundations for a new civilization, a new order, the order of the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, this new order, this new civilization, he said, Bunya al-Islamu ala khamsin. This civilization is built on 5 principles. We call these our 5 pillars. Testifying that there's one God and Muhammad is the Messenger ﷺ, performing the prayer, giving the zakat, fasting Ramadan, performing the Hajj. These 5 we learn about them often when we're young, and often we learn about them, about the most important things between us and Allah to be a good Muslim. It's absolutely what it is, but it's more than that as well. These 5 are the foundations for Islamic civilization. These are the foundations for an Islamic society. These are the foundations for what it means to build community and faith. If you look at, for example, the prayer, which is of the greatest of Islam's institutions, the prayer is not just something you do by yourself. The prayer is something you've been told to gather and offer. The prayer is something for the sake of which we were told to establish these masajid. And the masjid was the first thing the Prophet ﷺ established in Medina. And the masjid, what makes a masjid is that it's a space of land dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no human being can claim to own. If anyone says this is mine, it's not a masjid. What is the significance of this? A masjid is a place in which all people are equal. It's the most equal place in society. It's my first time in this masjid. I didn't feel like, oh, maybe I don't belong. Maybe I should pray in the back. Maybe I'm a stranger. Maybe somebody else's spot. I don't have this feeling. It's my masjid. It's like anybody else's because it's the house of Allah. What does the masjid create? It creates the notion of ummah. It tells you that what gathers the people in this room is not ethnicity or color or dress or even that you live down the road. Something else unites us and makes us one. What is it? It's that we belong to Allah and His Messenger. The masjid, which we establish for the sake of salat, what it really creates is ummah, a collective identity of iman. And that's very, very powerful. The masjid historically was the seat of all of Islam's great institutions. The universities started in the masajid and then they became institutions. The courthouse of justice started in the masajid. Then it became courts of law outside of the masajid. The masajid in the great cities of Islam, the grand mosque was next to the grand bazaar and the grand this. It was the heart of the anchor of the entire city is the masjid. And even in the modern Britain, what you find is the established masajid. Around them you're going to find all the Muslim businesses and halal meat shops and restaurants and charities. The masjid is the anchor through which a community knows itself. That's just salat. If you look at Ramadan, Ramadan is a communal period because the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to break each other's fast, and thereby he set the setting for lots of communal eating, lots of gathering together to feed each other. And the time of Ramadan is the time when the masajid are packed. So Ramadan is an energy throughout the community to come together and recognize why we are a community. Hajj is a time when we're told, leave your homes, travel the earth, and witness with your own eyes that this is a universally global ummah, across the languages and across the spaces. Zakat is an institution of this sort. It's an institution to build and nurture the ummah of the believers. That's why zakat is not now charity in general, it's charity in specific. And there's two constraints that gives us the nature of what this zakat is. All the schools of classical law agree that zakat is meant to be paid Muslim to Muslim. Why is that? Because it's meant to really cement what it means to belong to this community. That to be a Muslim really is to join a family. And when a Muslim's child is hungry, we have to feel like our child is hungry. So just like Islam strengthens the tie of blood, whether you fight with your brother or whether you make up with your brother, the fact he's your brother means you have a duty of care, a duty by virtue of blood. What the zakat is cementing is that there's another duty of care by virtue of iman, and it's the family of iman. And whoever has this iman, there is a duty of care between the two of you. Just like, so if the masjid brings us together in community, the zakat is saying now there's a duty of care in the community. It's not a lip service and shoulder to shoulder only. It's now, what's your need? I have to look after you to be a believer of the core pillars of iman. There's a second constraint the books of classical law also speak of, which strengthens this first point, which is that zakat is meant to be paid in the place where you live. When I say meant to be, there's a debate. Is it a duty or is it a sunnah? But the idea that the original conception of this institution is where you live, it's to build within us this duty to who are the Muslims around us. What are their concerns? What are their needs? So that if we see to this duty, we make sure that where we live, being a Muslim is meaningful. No one should be in this area suffering in silence and feel there's nobody there for them. If they say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, there should be a community there for them. If there's believers there, they shouldn't have to suffer in silence. So this institution of zakat, along with all of these pillars, if they're functioning, what it's meant to create is a sense of dignity. I'm so proud to belong to this group because this group looks after me. I'm so proud to belong to this group because we look out for each other and we make sure we have networks of care for each other. This is the essence of the da'wah of what we could call the civilizational da'wah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This is what made Islam spread. As the Muslims spread in the earth, they didn't do like they built little cities. Like the Muslims stayed in like Kufa, Iraq. They didn't really mix a lot with the other population. But over time, people wanted to join this group because this group had izz. This group was the triumphant group. It was meaningful. It was strong. Whether you spoke Arabic or not, you knew that belonging is here. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, يَدُ اللَّهِ مَعَ الْجَمَاعَةِ وَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَمَعَ الْوَاحِدِ وَهُوَ مِنَ الْإِثْنَيْنِ أَبْعَدِ. The hand of Allah is with the group. The devil is with the one who's by himself. And when there are two, the devil is further away. Everything in his sunnah was, if you come together as community, then you strengthen each other, you support each other, you remind each other, you catch each other. And that's how we preserve iman in the community. And that's the best thing we can offer the generation who will come after us. That they learn about Allah and His Messenger not as outcasts, afraid of the media, afraid of the school, afraid of society, but they learn about Allah and His Messenger in the comfort and the safety of community. There's a strong group and we are in the group. And we learn about Allah in that safety. So point number 3 is, if we look at the 3 points then, point number 1 is we need zakat for our own sake, for the blessings of our own homes. Point number 2 is, care for the needy is of the most basic meanings of Islam from the beginning until the end of the revelation. Point number 3 is zakat is one of these 5 pillars of iman that if they are served and they are served properly, it makes a community come together and it preserves their collective identity as believers. And that's of the most important things the Prophet ﷺ left this earth upon. And that's why the zakat and salat comes 28 times together in the Holy Quran, because these are the greatest anchors of this vision, a community of iman. That's 3 things about the why of zakat. Now 5 things about the what of zakat. I'm going to talk about zakat as the institution now. Point number 1 is what kind of wealth is zakat on? Zakat is not on all wealth and it's not simply income tax. Zakat is on a particular subset of wealth which in Arabic we call al-mal an-nami, which in English you can translate as growing wealth. What does growing wealth mean? Paying zakat shouldn't feel like you're cutting your hand off. Paying zakat should feel like you're cutting your hair. What's the difference? When you lose your hand, that's it. It's gone. There's nothing that's going to bring it back to you. When you cut your hair, it's okay. You don't feel pain. The barber didn't wrong you. You said, it's okay, because there's more coming. I'm hiding my boldness. I don't always have more coming. But if you go to the barber, it's okay. It's a thing in growth. It's a thing in motion. And why is zakat like that? Because all the rules are designed that it shouldn't be a burden. You shouldn't have to hide from it. Everyone can do their bit, one by one, by one, by one. But when it comes together, it makes a big difference. So what is the kinds of growing wealth then? Traditional societies, all societies on the planet, have three fundamental economies. One of them is animal herding. So this animal herding is when villages travel through the earth and they just want the animals to be fed, to produce milk, and to have babies. As the flock grows, the village is wealthier and the individuals are wealthier. So the zakat says, these animals that are growing each season, take a few of them for your neighbor. They don't have any animals. You shouldn't miss it. You had all these new babies this season, and inshallah there'll be more babies next season. That's the idea. You take zakat from something where it can be filled again. It's growing. That's why there's zakat on camels and sheep and cows. But we're not going to talk about them. I don't think you have many cow farmers here. But if you want to know, it's at least 30 cows, 5 camels, or 40 sheep. If that's your number, then we have to talk. The next one is agricultural. That's another economy. People settle around land. There's no zakat on the land or on the homes or any of their fixed assets. All the zakat says is, when the new growth comes from the earth, take a little bit for your neighbors, they don't have any food. And the rest, all this new food came this year, and next season you're going to get more. The gap is going to be filled. That's the idea of growing wealth. What I will talk about is the final economy, which is the one that we do inhabit. It's a trade-based economy. In trade-based economies, what is everybody trying to grow and nurture? It's basically the medium of exchange. We can call it money. This thing, with all of us just to survive, we're going to do some activity to keep the money growing. And it's going to come, and we're going to take some out, but then more will come and replace it. That's why the zakat is on this. What are the things that function as money? In our economy, it's 4 things. Zakat is only on these 4 things. There's no 5th thing. The first is simply, I'm just going to call it money. It's the thing we all know what money is. There's zakat on whatever money you own. The next 2 are gold and silver. Why is there zakat on gold and silver? It's because these have traditionally and historically been able to act as money. These has been the trans-regional, trans-empire forms of currency as gold and silver throughout human history. Throughout most of human history. Certainly the history of civilization. I could take a silver coin from the Persians, I could trade in Mecca, and I wouldn't have any problem because it's silver. And even in the 70s, the dollar was backed by gold. And even today, you can exchange your gold items on a fair market. It's a known rate. It's not like selling a second-hand item. That's why there's zakat on gold and silver, because it acts as money, or the sacred law treats it as money. The final one, which has zakat, is trade goods. Trade goods are things you bought to sell. Anything you buy to sell is like liquid for the trader. If I'm selling microphones, for example, I have money. How do I make my money grow? I put the money into microphones. I sell the microphones, I get more money. More money, more microphones. More microphones, more money. That's how you make growth, through trade. So the microphone trader, in my example, he bought the microphone not to be fixed. He bought it to be liquid. It's like money for this person. That's why there's zakat on trade goods. So, and I'll go into the details in a bit, but just to answer this first question, zakat's only on these 4 things for us. The money, the gold, the silver, and these trade goods. There's no 5th thing which has zakat. As for all the modern things, which I will also come to, the shares and the pensions and the cryptocurrencies and all these fancy things, they will only have zakat if they contain one of these 4, or they act as a trade good. Otherwise, there's no zakat. So these are the 4. This is the first thing. What is zakat on? I've explained why the 4 and why the notion of growing wealth, to make it easy for us. The second thing is, how much do you have to own? The Prophet ﷺ, he set a minimum threshold in each of these kinds of wealth. I told you already what it is for the camels and the cows and the sheep. There's a debate of the fuqaha on the agriculture. In our economy of trade, the Prophet ﷺ, he placed a threshold in terms of gold and in terms of silver. 20 gold dinars, 200 silver dirhams. These were of similar value in his age, but over time there was a disparity. The gold became more valuable, silver became less valuable. In our day today, the difference between the two is approximately to an order of 10. So the nisab when measured in silver is approximately 400 pounds. The nisab when measured in gold is approximately 4,000 pounds. So it's an order of 10 between the two. Which of the two should you measure yourself against to know do you have to pay zakat or not? I'll say you're going to find two measures on the internet. What the scholars traditionally said was follow the one that's best for the poor. What you'll find is many of the ulama of our community we've consulted, so the most common one of our community here in Great Britain is to follow the lower one, so more zakat gets paid. I'll tell you at the end where you can find both values online, but just to let you know that what most scholars of the UK advise is the lower one, which leads to more zakat being paid. So what makes you a zakat payer then, is when your money plus your gold, plus your silver, plus your trade goods, take away any debts and liabilities you have, the final number, if it's above this nisab value, then you're going to be a zakat payer. That's point number 2. How much do you have to own? Point number 3 is when do you pay zakat? Everyone pays zakat on their own zakat date. It's meant to be personal to each of us because your zakat date is based on your own economic history. And I'll explain to you how you identify it. We are meant to pay only once a lunar year on the zakat date. Why is it once a lunar year? Because we have a full year to achieve growth. You have this money and you have 1 year. Do something with it. Because at the end of it, some of it will be taken away from you. Secondly, the idea of the lunar calendar, why is it there? It's to make it easy for us to calculate. Because if we each had to keep track of all the money that came and all the money that went, it will be a very complicated calculation. You need a personal accountant for your zakat. But like I said, the rules have been designed for us all to be able to take part. So all you have to do literally is 1 day in the year only, just count what you're worth. You don't have to track the fluctuations during the year. On your date, my money on this day, plus my gold, plus my silver, plus my trade items, minus my debts on this day, what are they worth? If it's above the nisab, then I pay 2.5%. That's how the lunar calendar works. You just take a snapshot of yourself on 1 day of the year. Now, how do you identify your date? It's meant to be based on your own economic history. So the first time in your life when you were adult and Muslim, and your net zakat, meaning your assets minus liabilities of zakat, the first time it crossed the nisab marker, what you're meant to do is note the date. You don't pay zakat the first time you cross, you just note the date. And then 1 lunar year later on the same date, then you check, am I still above the nisab? If you're still above the nisab, then 2.5% of that full value. And every year on that date, if you're above the nisab on that date, 2.5%, next date, 2.5%, once a year. That's all you have to do. This is your personal date. And it stays your date for life, unless 1 day on that date, you are below the nisab. If you're below the nisab on your zakat date, then you don't pay zakat and you lose the date as well. And you wait till the next time you cross the nisab, you note the date. 1 year later, you're still above nisab, then 2.5%. That's your new date for life. This is how the calendar is meant to work. Many people don't know about their date because they learn about zakat later in life. If that's the case, then what you should do is look back in your life to the best of your ability and make an estimate. Make your best guess of what is your real date based on your own economic history. If you're utterly unable to do this for whatever reason, then fine. Then you just pick an arbitrary date and you make your zakat go on the arbitrary date. So you get the idea, there's no notion that zakat is meant to be due in Ramadan. Zakat is due on our personal dates. Now, why do many people pay in Ramadan? It's because of the blessings and the virtue of good deeds in this month. But if you have a zakat date, what you're really doing in Ramadan is estimating. You're going to say, I think my zakat is going to be 500, so you pay 500 as zakat. This is fine. You'll never know actually what you owe except on your date. That's when you're going to calculate what you have. So let's say I pay 500 Ramadan, that's my estimate as zakat. When my date comes, then I know exactly what I owe. So if what I really owe is 600, then I just pay 1 extra 100 on my date. If what I really owe is 400, then the extra 100 I've paid, you can either consider it as extra charity, or you can carry it over into the next year, that I've already prepaid 100 now for the next year. So it might sound complicated, but that's how the date is meant to work. Reason why it's important is that it's only on the date you'll know what you owe. So we also do our best to have a date for this reason. The fourth one is, does the zakat time out? Like any debt, if I owe somebody money, if I don't pay them back when I promised, I still owe them the money. And so similarly, the zakat is due if you haven't paid it. If some people haven't paid zakat in the past, or they haven't been paying zakat at all, then my advice to them is don't worry about the past right now, just figure out the present. Do your best to understand to the best what should be a suitable date for you, and then discharge it, understand the rules, take care of the right of people today. And once you understand how to do that, then yes, make an estimate of what you might have owed from the past and make a plan to pay it in a way that's easy for you and your finances. Could be in bits and pieces, and it could be more than that, whatever you can manage. That's point number 4. And the last point is, can any payment count as zakat? And the answer is no, the zakat has to be intended as zakat. It's something between you and Allah. You say, oh Allah, this is my zakat, please accept it from me. You can intend it at any point between your calculation and between the final time when the end user has taken it. The final thing that connects to this, can somebody else pay your zakat for you on your behalf? The answer is actually yes. Somebody else can pay zakat from their money as well, as long as you approve of it and authorize it, because that makes it your intention. This happens frequently within families. Sometimes the lady has the gold and the husband has the money. So the way it works is, every individual must calculate their own zakat, assets and liabilities, as an individual. The wife does her own calculation, husband his own, partners in a business do their own. But once you've done it, yes, the husband can pay for the family with their authorization and approval. One partner can pay for the partners with their authorization and approval. This is fine because it counts as their intention, but it shouldn't be done behind their back. These are the 5 questions I said I'd answer within the what. We know what kind of wealth the zakat is on. It's on your money, your gold, your silver, and your trade goods. We know that you have to have above of a minimum threshold. It's called the nisab. I'll show you where you can find it online. We've said that you pay it once a year on your zakat date. I've discussed how you identify this date. We've mentioned that it's something that it doesn't time out and it needs to have an intention. These are the 5. Now just to the absolute nuts and bolts. 6 points about the actual calculation. So point number 1, I've already told it to you. What is the formula? Add up your zakatable assets, take away your debts and liabilities. If the final number is above the nisab, 2.5%. That's the formula. Let's look at the money now. Money is really straightforward. Whatever you have, that is money. It could be physical, it could be in the account, it could be in rupees, and it could be in pounds. Convert it to one currency so you can add up the whole calculation. What if it's money that you've lent to somebody? Money that you've lent to somebody is still your money. It's just in somebody else's hand. So whether it's money I've lent to them, and they haven't denied that they owe it to me, they just said, give me time. So I'm expecting it, I'm just waiting. This kind of a loan, or if I'm a trader, I've sold my goods and I'm waiting for the payment. So whether you're waiting for the payment of a sale, or whether you're waiting for the repayment of a loan, this is your money. It's just not in your hand right now. And because of this, you have 2 options of how you might want to pay this zakat. One option is you just add it to your calculation even though it's not in your hand right now. This makes the calculation easy. So let's say it's a 5-year loan. Every year I just add it to my zakat and I pay the zakat on it. After 5 years when I receive it, I've already taken care of all the zakat on it. I just put it in my pocket and carry on. The other thing I might want to do, especially if it's a large sum, is I might want to wait till I receive it and I don't pay the zakat over the years. And then once I receive it, I pay the 5 years worth of zakat from it, and then I keep the rest. I've got 2 options then on the zakat of money that's lent out. That's when it comes to money. The next thing is gold and silver. When it comes to gold and silver, the scholars have a debate about jewelry that people wear. I guess specifically gold that women wear. For some of our scholars, these are the scholars of the Hanafi school, they felt that jewelry, gold and silver in all of its forms, has the potential to act as money. It can be liquidated on a fair market. And that's why jewelry as gold is so popular in these cultures, so that if there are hard times, it's like an insurance. You can liquidate and you can take care of yourself. So it has a money-like nature intrinsically to it, and therefore there's zakat on it in whatever form it's in. And according to this, then how would you calculate the zakat? You want to estimate what you'd get for the gold at a jewelry shop today, not how much you bought it for, and not necessarily the market bullion value, which is a different value for gold. It's what we call like a scrap gold value. It's a little bit cheaper than the online value for bullion. and you can get it from a jeweler, and I'll show you where you can access these values online as well. And it should be at least 50% pure gold, like 12 carat or more. Less than that is not gold, according to the fiqh. Other scholars the scholars of the other schools felt that if jewelry is worn, it's become more like a fixed asset. And I said there's no zakat on fixed assets. Zakat is on these items of growing wealth that I've discussed. So there is a debate on the worn jewelry, and I'll just give you both positions, and you can see what's more familiar to you and more appropriate to you. The last of the assets is trade goods. Trade goods are things you bought to sell. Anything you bought to sell, as long as that's still your intention, that if a good buyer comes today, I will sell it today. This is a trade item. You only bought it to liquidate it. It's like money for you. So whatever it's worth for you today on the market, that's its value in zakat, and you add it to your zakat calculation. If you bought it to sell it, but then you changed your mind and now you want to use it and keep it, you don't care about buyers anymore, there's no zakat on it anymore. If you didn't buy it to sell it, but now you've put it on eBay for sale, there's also no zakat on it. A trade good is something you bought it to make it liquid. You bought it to make it into money, and you're waiting for the right time to sell it. That's a trade good, and you owe it on the full market value. Because your intention upon sale is relevant here, then that's what we have to look into. So if somebody, for example, buys a second property, for example, if they bought it and you ask them, why did you buy it? And they say, I just wanted my money in a more safe area. I didn't want it to lose value. I'll see what I do in the future. There's no active trade intention in this. So there's no zakat on such a property. If somebody says, I bought second property for the rental, a rental property is not on the market. A rental property wasn't purchased to be converted all into money again. So there's no zakat on a rental property. As for the rent itself, I've already told you, you don't need to keep track of fluctuations of money during the year. You just want to count what it is on your date. So there's no special calculation for rent. You just calculate your money, like I've said. And a rental property is not for resale. But if somebody says they bought a second property just for resale, I bought it, I'm going to fix it up, and I'm going to sell it. This is a trade good. And they owe the zakat on the market value of this property on the day of their zakat date. A similar example, if I've got many cars for my pleasure, there's no zakat on them. Many cars for rental, there's no zakat on them. Many cars for resale, there's zakat on the market value of those cars on the day of my zakat date. If somebody is a manufacturing business, you buy raw materials and you work into them something in manufacture, then what you do on your zakat date is the raw materials that you have, you estimate their worth as raw materials, and the ones you've manufactured, you estimate their worth as final goods, because that's what they're worth to you on the market. That's if you're in a manufacturing with your trade goods. So we've done all of the basic zakatable assets now, the money, the gold, the silver, the trade goods. All I'll give you now is the advice we give when it comes to some of our modern investments. So if you look at, for example, shares represent part ownership in a company. Some people buy shares as traders. They bought them to sell them. This is just the same as any other trade good. You owe the zakat on the full market value of these shares on the day of your zakat date. Not what you bought them for, but on this date, what would you get for them? Some people don't buy shares for that reason. They just own shares for dividend and other forms of long-term advantage. These people don't owe zakat on the market value of the share. However, the share represents a part ownership of all the assets of this company. You are a part owner of the factory, the furniture, the offices. You are also a part owner of the money of this company. You are also a part owner of the trade goods of this company. So what we say is that the fairest way to look at this form of ownership is to pay the zakat on the part of the zakatable assets of the company which you own. How do you figure this out? You can look at the balance sheet of this company, and you can figure out from there what proportion of the company is zakatable. Let's say 10% of what BT is worth is money and trade items, let's just say. If that's the case, then you owe zakat on 10% of your shares, 2.5% of 10%. If you don't want to do the investigation yourself, then the muftis we've been working with, they went through all the public listed companies on the FTSE 100 stock exchange and their balance sheets, and they found that it never exceeds 25%. So they said if you don't want to do the investigation, you can just assume 25%, i.e. 2.5% of 25% of your shares is what the zakat due is of the shares. That's our advice on shares. Our advice on pensions is similar. Some pensions, typically in the public sector, there's no investment today in your name, but once you retire, you have a salary. In these cases, there's nothing in your name today. There's no investment that you own today. There's no zakat to think about today. Other pensions are schemes that you can opt into, opt out of, and it's an investment in your name. You can see the portfolio, you can see how it's growing. It's just another investment for you. In this case, we say the fairest way to look at it is you are the owner, so you should pay zakat on the proportion of zakatable assets within the investments. Just like I said with the shares, how much within the investment is money or gold or silver or trade goods. You can figure this out by asking these pension providers. Again, our muftis have worked through the main pension schemes, and they've come up with main benchmark amounts for each of these. On top of my head, a Sharia pension, they say 24%. Some property investment, they say 15%. So they've gone through each of these about what they say is an appropriate thing to estimate. And I can show you where you can find this online. If you look at cryptocurrencies, some cryptocurrencies are made for payment. They're payment tokens, like Bitcoin. So these ones, we say the best way to look at this kind of holding is to treat it like money. It is added to your money. Other forms of cryptocurrencies are not made for payment. They're just tokenized assets of a digital sort, like these NFTs. These things, we say there's no zakat on them unless you bought them to sell them. Unless you bought them to trade, then there's nothing zakatable within them. What about children's investments? If people have invested in child trusts and other forms of saving investments for children, the scholars of the Hanafi school said there's no zakat on the wealth of children until they reach puberty. And so according to them, there's nothing you have to do with anything that you've assigned to your children, whether it's an investment or whether it's gold you've given to them as it's theirs in this case. According to other schools, there is zakat on the wealth of children because it's Muslim holdings. And so according to this then, if you're going to follow this, you just want to figure out the proportion of what's zakatable in these assets. According to our muftis, in most of these child trusts, you can simply assume 25% is zakatable within the trust. So I've given you very quickly some of our advice on these modern instruments. That's all what you add up. What about what you subtract? What you subtract is going to be your debts and liabilities today. What have you been billed today? It could be bills, it could be invoices, it could be course fees. What have you been invoiced today that you owe somebody money? That's what you subtract. You don't subtract what you anticipate to owe somebody next month or next year, like next month electricity and next year's university fees or the like. If you're in a long-term sort of debt repayment plan, like a mortgage, then what we say is you definitely can't subtract the entire mortgage. And the reason for this is that you're legally protected from having anyone asking you for next year's payment today. The bank will never ask you for the whole mortgage this year. In fact, they'll fine you if you dare try to get out of debt, according to their system. And that's why we say the most you can subtract in this arrangement is what you owe within this 12-month period, within this zakat year. That's the most that a person should be able to subtract. And some scholars say that you should just subtract the immediate month's payment. So you're between the immediate month and the maximum is 12 months. And you can't subtract more than that of these long-term repayment plans because no one's going to ask you for them this year. We give the same advice for the student loans. Whatever you're going to repay this year is what you subtract. And we also say that you shouldn't subtract the interest, but just the principal of these, because of the sacred law stance against interest. That, my friends, maybe I've talked a little bit more than 35 minutes. I've got a few more things to say there before I wrap up. But that is the entire calculation. I've told you everything that you add. I've told you why these things have zakat in them. I've told you everything that you subtract. If the final number is above the nisab threshold, it's 2.5% of this number. All that's left is some online resources that can help you. So if you go to the National Zakat Foundation website, nzf.org.uk, if you click on calculate, you're going to find a whole host of services that will help you in your calculation. You can book a free 15-minute consultation with a mufti just to talk over your personal business or investment or something that you're finding too complicated for yourself to figure out. You can access the nisab rates for today and going all the way back 22 years if you want to also calculate zakat liabilities from the past. You can download zakat guides, that little booklets that you can read. In general, zakat guide, a business zakat guide, and a missed zakat guide. You can access a knowledge bank of probably the most expansive sort of knowledge resource for zakat questions. It's got 20 FAQs, and you can search it within the bank as well. If you don't find your question, you can just send in a question and we'll do our best to answer it as quickly as we can. And you have an online calculator. The online calculator is probably the best calculator you're going to find on the internet, because it follows the logic and the details and the research of my presentation completely. So you just click whatever assets you have and it takes you through questions. What's the money in your bank, money in your hand? What's the money owed to you? What's the money owed to you in business? It'll talk to you about shares. It'll give you a helpful help button. If you click on the help, it'll summarize the main description that I've given on the zakat of shares. It's built into it, the 25% if you're holding shares not for resale. When it comes to pension, if you don't know how to deal with it, you just give us the type of pension, and built into it is the research on what typically is zakatable within these schemes. You type whatever liabilities you have. When it comes to your gold, the help button will tell you the debate scholars have about gold. If you want to evaluate the gold yourself, you can give the value. If not, you can just give the weight, and the calculator will have the daily scrap gold value built into it. So it's a very smart calculator which will just help you go all the way through to the end of the calculation. These are just some calculation services you can find on the National Zakat Foundation website, nzf.org.uk. The last point I was going to talk about was the where of zakat. I've already said at the beginning why there is this interest in the sacred law for concern where you live. So you can build and nurture and develop an actual community where you live. And that there's a particular right, which we can call the right of your neighbor in faith, that we have to consider to be sacred. So my advice to everybody is, if you're not already doing this, is that you at least start paying some of your zakat here within the United Kingdom. What it's going to do for you is, A, it's your contribution to the right of the neighbor in faith, but secondly, it's going to start a journey for you. Because many in our community assume that there's no one in need, because we live in a welfare state. But the truth of the matter is when you start showing an interest to the needs of Muslims where you live, then you start following the stories. Then you start understanding really what's going on where we live, and really what are the projects here where we live. So that's just my advice to all of you. I'm going to say a little bit about National Zakat Foundation. National Zakat Foundation has been operating for about 11 years. We help people through 3 basic funds. One is we give people cash grants for emergency spending. We can do this through the post office. We can do this through bank accounts, and also through the post office for people who don't have bank accounts. We help people with very basic housing needs, so the rent deposit to secure a house, or the rent arrears so you don't get kicked out of your home, council tax, and basic furniture, so you have a fridge and a cooker and so on. And we help people who are not in work or struggling to get into work to do a basic course of training, which we can agree with them to get into employment. We also help people who are skilled but don't have the tools to get these tools so they can get into employment again. And we help people who are financially struggling but they want to be part of public service to, like being an imam or being a chaplain or being a counsellor, to have this sort of course of training. What we found, so I just want to say something about local needs. Based on the last census, British Muslims are 50% in poverty, based on the standards of poverty, compared with 18% of the wider population, and compared with much more than any other faith group. We might not realize it, but as a community, we are most disproportionately represented in poverty. We are disproportionately represented in many social ills because of this. We are disproportionately represented in the prison population, for example. We're 5% of the general population, but at least 15% of the prison population. These are all things tied with issues of financial support. The Prophet ﷺ, he tied together kufr and faqr. He said, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-kufr wal faqr. I seek your protection from unbelief and from poverty. And so what I'm trying to get at is the need is quite real here. The Muslim census, they did a study in the pandemic, and according to their survey, Muslims were up to 10 times more affected than the wider population by the economic downfall of the pandemic. We're currently in a cost of living crisis. What we found at National Zakat Foundation, we found that the number of people asking for help has been almost double in the last 4 months. And we're not sure how it is we can kind of match this current need. And so I'm reaching out to various forms of charities and mosques to find ways that we can collaborate to share some of the zakat, not saying all the zakat, but some of the zakat to help us to collaborate in some of our local needs for our community. So I'm just sharing with you some of the data that I have in terms of the need locally is real. It's not just in theory. And if we find ways to collaborate, I think there's a lot of work that we can do within the United Kingdom. That's all I wanted to share here. Inshallah, I'm happy to answer any questions people have about the why, the what, the how at all. Inshallah. Thank you very much for your time. Barakallahu feekum.